The Valley of June and the River of Time, a novella written by Irving P. Freely. Prologue. The Valley of June. No one could remember how they arrived in the Valley of June. They only remembered waking. Some woke beneath trees, some beside rivers, and some in fields silvered with dew. Others opened their eyes on quiet roads leading toward villages whose windows glowed with the soft amber light of morning. But all of them, sooner or later, found the path. It began at the foot of an ancient oak tree on a hill overlooking the valley. From there it wound downward through meadow grass, past gardens and rivers, across hayfields and sleeping towns, beneath stars and moonlight, and finally back again to the place where it had begun. Those who walked it never agreed on how long the journey lasted. A day, some said; a lifetime, said others; a dream, said a few. But the oldest among them knew better. The Valley of June was not a place one reached by road. It appeared only when the world had grown quiet enough for a soul to hear what had always been playing beneath the noise of living. A melody, faint as birdsong, old as light. And on the morning that concerns us, a man opened his eyes beneath the oak and heard it for the first time. Book 1. Morning. Chapter 1. Before the sun finds the meadow. At first there was only mist. It lay low across the meadow, gathered in pale ribbons between the hills, softening every shape it touched. The grass around him shimmered with dew. Above him, the branches of the oak stretched wide and dark against a sky not yet ready to become morning. The man did not know his name. This did not frighten him immediately. There are moments after waking when the world has not yet returned to its proper order, when the self has not fully settled back into the body. For a few breaths, he assumed this was one of those moments. Then he sat up. The hillside descended before him into a valley he did not recognize. Rolling fields, a narrow footpath, and a silver stream in the distance. Farther still lay the dark outline of a village sleeping beneath the final blue of night. He looked behind him, but there was only the oak. Its trunk was impossibly wide, its bark deeply furrowed, its roots rising from the earth like old hands. It seemed less like a tree than a witness. The man stood slowly. His clothes were plain, dark trousers, a white shirt, and worn boots dampened by the grass. He searched his pockets and found nothing. No wallet, no watch, no keys. There was nothing to tell him where he had been, where he was going, or who he was supposed to be. Then he heard the sound again. A flute, or something like a flute. It came from somewhere beyond the meadow, thin and pure, rising and falling in a phrase so simple it felt almost familiar. Not familiar like a song he had once heard, but familiar like a feeling from childhood. Sunlight through curtains, a screen door closing, a voice calling from another room. He turned toward it. The eastern horizon had begun to glow. A faint gold spread beneath the clouds as the mist brightened and the dew caught fire one blade at a time. Somewhere in the branches above him, a bird gave a single uncertain note, then fell silent, as though waiting for permission duly granted to continue. The man stepped onto the path. The moment his boot touched the worn earth, the music changed. Not louder, closer. The meadow seemed to respond. The grasses leaned with a breeze he could not feel, and the leaves of the oak trembled softly. Far below, the stream caught the first line of light and carried it through the valley like a secret. He walked. With each step, the sky opened further. The path curved gently through wildflowers not yet fully awake. White daisies bowed beneath pearls of dew, purple lupines stood in shadow, and yellow blooms turned toward a sun that had not yet appeared. He passed a weathered fence post, then another. Beyond them, cattle grazed in the mist, their shapes vague and dreamlike. A distant horn sounded from somewhere across the hills, low and warm, answered by another farther away. The man stopped. There were no roads that he could see, no wires, no engines, no sound of anything modern or urgent. Only the valley, only the gathering light, only the flute. And then, without warning, he remembered something. A kitchen table, morning light, a woman laughing softly as she poured coffee, a child's hand in his. Then it was gone. The memory vanished so quickly that he staggered, reaching for it like a man trying to catch smoke. His chest tightened. Had it been his memory, or someone else's? The path continued downward as the sun broke the horizon. Light spilled over the fields in one great golden breath. The mist lifted from the meadow, and birds erupted from the trees, filling the air with bright, overlapping song. The valley, which a moment before had seemed half-dreamed, became suddenly and impossibly alive. The man stood in the center of it all, unable to move. For the first time since waking, he felt afraid. Not because the place was strange, because it was beautiful. Too beautiful. The kind of beauty that asks something of you, the kind that does not let you remain unchanged. Behind him, the oak waited on the hill. Before him, the path descended into morning, and somewhere ahead, hidden beyond the brightening fields, the flute began its melody again. This time, the man followed. Chapter 2. Windows Open to the Breeze. The path left the meadow and descended toward the village. By now the sun had risen fully above the hills, its light spilling across the valley in broad golden sheets, illuminating every field, every rooftop, and every winding curve of the river below. The traveler walked in silence. The memory from earlier lingered, the woman laughing, the child holding his hand, the feeling that he had almost remembered something important. Yet every attempt to grasp it sent it slipping away. The village slowly grew larger. White cottages appeared first, then gardens, then stone walls lined with flowering vines. The air carried the scent of fresh bread, cut grass, and something else he could not identify, something familiar. A church bell rang, not loudly, just once. The sound drifted across the valley like a pebble dropped into still water. When he reached the first house, he stopped. Its windows stood open and white curtains moved gently in the breeze. A woman watering flowers looked up from her garden and smiled. "Good morning." The traveler hesitated. "Good morning." The woman seemed entirely unsurprised to see him, as though strangers appeared on foot from the hills every day. "You've come a long way," she said. "I don't know where I've come from." The woman nodded thoughtfully. "Most don't." Then she returned to watering her flowers. The traveler stood motionless. "Wait." The woman glanced up. "Can you tell me where I am?" She considered the question. "Of course." Her smile widened. "You're in the valley." "Yes, but where is the valley?" The woman laughed softly, and the sound reminded him of the memory he could not hold. "That's a harder question." Before he could ask another, she pointed farther down the road. "The baker makes excellent pastries. You should speak with him." And just like that, the conversation was over. The traveler continued walking. The village streets curved gently around gardens and stone cottages. Children played beneath trees, old men sat on benches watching the river, and shopkeepers swept their doorways. Everyone smiled when they saw him. No one seemed surprised. No one seemed curious. No one asked who he was. At last he reached a small bakery near the village square. The scent alone nearly stopped him. Warm bread, cinnamon, honey. Something deep inside him stirred. The baker emerged carrying a tray of rolls, a large man with flour on his apron and a face weathered by countless mornings. Without a word, he handed one to the traveler. "You're expected." The traveler blinked. "What?" The baker shrugged. "Eventually." "What does that mean?" The baker leaned against the doorway. "Every traveler arrives eventually." The traveler stared at him. "Traveler? That's what you are, isn't it?" "I don't know." The baker nodded. "Neither did I." For a moment, neither man spoke. The square buzzed quietly around them as birds crossed overhead and the river sparkled beyond the rooftops. Finally, the traveler asked the question that had begun troubling him. "How long have I been here?" The baker looked genuinely puzzled. "Today?" "No, here." The baker followed his gaze toward the valley, toward the hills, and toward the river winding through the distant fields. A strange expression crossed his face, something between amusement and sadness. Long enough to ask that question. Then he pointed east, far beyond the village and far beyond the river, toward a solitary hill standing above the fields. Upon it stood another oak tree, smaller than the one where the traveler had awakened, but unmistakably related. "If you're looking for answers," the baker said quietly, "follow the river." The traveler looked toward the distant water. For the first time, he noticed something unusual. The river did not seem to flow in a single direction. At certain bends it appeared to move forward, at others it seemed to drift backward, like a memory being rewound. The baker smiled. "You've noticed." "Noticed what?" "The river of time." A breeze moved through the square and the church bell rang again. Somewhere far away, carried on the wind, a flute began to play. And for the first time since waking beneath the oak, the traveler felt certain of one thing. The river was calling him.
Chapter 3. The Garden in Full Conversation.
The traveler left the village by a narrow road lined with stone walls and wild roses. Behind him, the bakery bell chimed softly as the door opened and closed. Voices drifted from the square. A child laughed, and somewhere a broom brushed across wooden steps. Life continued as though his arrival had caused no disturbance at all. Ahead of him, the road bent toward the river. He could see it now between the houses, bright and winding, slipping through the valley like a ribbon of light. The baker had called it the River of Time, but from where the traveler stood it appeared harmless enough. Beautiful, certainly. Strange, perhaps, but only water moving beneath the sun. Then the wind shifted, the river flashed silver, and for the briefest instant he saw, not his reflection upon its surface, but a face. A boy's face. Laughing, running, gone. The traveler stopped so suddenly that dust rose around his boots. He stared at the river, but there was only water, only sunlight, only the slow, patient current. A gate creaked nearby. He turned to find that to his left, beyond a low stone wall, stood a garden unlike any he had ever seen. It spread behind a cottage with blue shutters and a moss-covered roof, overflowing with color and motion. Lavender leaned against foxglove, white daisies trembled beside yellow roses, and bees moved from bloom to bloom with solemn purpose. Butterflies drifted like loose scraps of sky. At the center of the garden stood an old man in a straw hat, pruning a rose bush with the care of someone performing surgery on a friend. Without looking up, he said, "You saw something in the river." The traveler did not answer at first. The old man clipped a dead branch, noting that it happens. "Who was he?" the traveler asked. The gardener placed the branch in a wicker basket. "Who was who?" "The boy." At this, the old man finally looked up. His eyes were pale blue and sharp as morning frost. "That depends on whether you recognized him." The traveler looked back toward the river. "I don't know." "That is usually the first answer," the old man said, smiling faintly. "The second comes later." He opened the gate, and it swung inward without a sound. "You may as well come in. The garden has been waiting for you." The traveler almost laughed. Almost. But in the Valley of June, such statements had begun to feel less impossible than ordinary speech. He stepped through the gate, and the moment he entered, the air changed. Outside the garden, morning had been warm and bright. Inside, it seemed alive with layers of sound too delicate to separate. Bees hummed in low harmony, leaves whispered against one another, water trickled from a stone basin, and birds called from the branches in brief, answering phrases. It was not noise, it was conversation. The garden spoke in green things. The gardener returned to his roses. "Most people think flowers are silent," he said. "They are not. They are simply patient." The traveler walked slowly between the beds as a white butterfly landed on a purple bloom and opened its wings. "What is this place?" "A garden." The traveler glanced at him, but the old man did not smile. "That is all anything is, at first." "And after?" "After, it becomes what you are ready to see." A breeze moved through the garden. All at once the flowers turned, not toward the sun, but toward the traveler. He froze. The gardener continued pruning, remarking that they were simply curious about what he carried. "I don't carry anything," the traveler replied. The old man gave a dry chuckle. "Everyone says that when they arrive." The traveler looked down at his empty hands. "What do I carry?" The gardener set down his shears. "Fragments." The words seemed to settle heavily in the air. Fragments of who you were, of who you thought you were, of who others needed you to be, of what you loved and forgot, of what you lost and pretended not to miss. The traveler felt a sudden pressure in his chest, and the garden blurred slightly. Again came the memory of the woman at the kitchen table. This time there was more: sunlight across her hair, a mug in her hand, and a child's voice calling from another room. He heard his own laughter, older and younger at once. Then the scene shifted to a hallway, rain beating against a window, and someone crying behind a closed door. A hand, his hand, rested against the dark wood, unable to knock. The traveler staggered backward. A vine brushed his wrist, and the touch was gentle, almost human. The gardener watched him without moving. "These are not punishments," he said. "They feel like them. Most true things do at first." The traveler swallowed hard. "Are they mine?" The old man bent to lift his basket. "Some." "Only some?"